Welcome back. Kansas, in the heartland of America, has solidly backed President Bush's war in Iraq. But now, the specter of Vietnam has re-entered the American psyche, and veterans who fought in that controversial war are deeply concerned.
At Veterans Memorial Park in Emporia, Kansas,
it's a place to honor everybody that served.
Preparations are underway for Memorial Day ceremonies to honor America's war dead.
And this is such a neat place to do that.
Ron Whitney is part of the volunteer crew that puts on the finishing touches.
We were really proud of this place. We've done a lot of work on down here.
Counter march, 5 files, left, march.
At a cemetery outside Emporia, locals turn out to hear the roll call of soldiers killed in the cause of preserving the Union and ending slavery during the American Civil War.
Private John Henry Walker, Private Daniel W. Hanlon, Sergeant Thomas J. Gwinner.
Dressing up in period uniforms and carrying around old Civil War weapons is obviously more than just play acting. The respect and affection shown for veterans is genuine, regardless of whether the war they fought in was popular with the general public. But that wasn't always the case.
A lot of us now, when we served in Vietnam, it was kind of humiliating, and just sickening to us to come back to nothing other than our families. And I think a lot of us veterans now just feel that we're not going to let that happen.
Some Vietnam veterans tell stories of coming home to a very hostile reception. Ron Whitney says it wasn't so much that people were hostile, they were just indifferent.
There was no protests, when I got off the plane or anything like that. So there wasn't anything going on in that respect. But on the other hand, when I did go home, there certainly wasn't any congratulations or how you been doing and, that sort of thing.
Ron says he's happy that returning Iraq veterans like Pat Baker have had a different sort of homecoming. Pat says he's still amazed at his reception.
I loved it when I came home. Everybody was so nice to us. When I came home on R&R, we flew into Dallas, and there were people there giving us cookies, bottled water. I mean, there were even young ladies coming up and trying to give us hugs, and a kid offering to let me use his cell phone to call home. It's like, man, this is unreal. I just come out of a combat zone. And
That's the way it should be. It should have been that way for all wars, but it wasn't. But,
yeah.
Ron Whitney worries that if the war in Iraq drags on, it'll be perceived as a rerun of Vietnam, and he doesn't think that comparison is valid.
There's a lot of difference between the two wars, in my opinion. Vietnam was, it started off with good intentions, but it turned sour very quickly. Keep in mind, we was over in Vietnam for well over 10 years, and we lost 58,000 good young men and women in that war, and it turned out to be just a horrible situation.
Welcome to Veterans of Foreign Wars Memorial Day service.
It's hard to know whether people here are starting to think of Iraq as another Vietnam. Regardless, they still listen faithfully when soldiers back from Iraq talk about the horrors of war.
May 2nd, 2004 was like any other Sunday. In Iraq, it was hot. At 3:14 p.m. in the afternoon, a large boom dropped me and everyone around me.
Since 2003, stories of sacrifice in Iraq have become a regular feature of patriotic gatherings across the nation.
I looked up and saw a mushroom cloud of dirt, about 2 stories tall, no more than 30 feet from me. Then I heard, "Tipton's down, Tipton's down." Before I knew it, I was rushing to John as rounds were still going off.
In small towns like this, the loss of even one son or daughter touches the entire community. So these stories seem to be felt a little more deeply here.
When I saw John lying on the ground, he was unconscious, but still breathing. John was struck in the head by a piece of shrapnel from a mortar round. I put Captain John E. Tipton on a CH-47 to be air evac to Baghdad. I never saw him again. They gave me a Bronze Star for what I did in Iraq, but I give it back to see John, smiling face one more time.
Events like this can reinforce resolve, but they can also lead people to wonder about the sacrifices being made, about whether those sacrifices are being made in vain.
There doesn't seem to be any exit strategy down the road that the government wants to go by.
Some older veterans disagree with Ron Whitney. They say that as the fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan has continued, we're now repeating mistakes that should have been learned in places like Vietnam and Korea.
Where was our leadership? And that's exactly the way I feel about the war we're in right now.
A lot of the criticism is over the way the war is being conducted.
If this is going on long enough, now they're going to start lumping it all together, the same thing that was going on in 2003, 2004. It's not what's going on now.
But some veterans, Ron Whitney's one of them, believe that one reason the war seems to be losing support in the American heartland is a media focus on negative news.
You pick up the paper every day and they're criticizing our government.
Well,
So it's far worse than just what we're saying here. I mean, you can't pick up the newspaper without being critical of why we do this and why we do that. And it all, it never ends.
If these veterans don't always see eye to eye on how the war is being waged or portrayed, they say it's important to make a distinction between the war and the men and women ordered to fight it. A distinction they worry could eventually become just as blurred as it was during Vietnam.
I fear that we're going to continue to lose that or get less and less support. When it first started, I think the support was extremely high because I think it was, after 9/11, we felt we were attacked and we had to counterattack, which we did, but as time goes on, that support is going to dwindle, I fear.
Yes, I think that, we need to maybe start worrying about our own problems before we take on everybody else's.
When I came to Emporia, I wondered if a traditionally conservative community with such strong ties to the military was prepared to ask itself hard questions about the war.
I'd say it's time to make a plan to get out.
Discontent and unrest right now.
Discontent. I think people are saddened by the loss of life.
Somebody better give there.
I wondered about the conflict within veterans like Pat Baker. On one hand, he believes his service there was the result of a lie. Or he says the U.S. can't simply leave, even if that means losing American soldiers every day to attacks by insurgents.
They'll see our withdrawal as weakness, and they're going to start getting worse. Yeah. They definitely need to do something about the insurgency.
And I wondered how veterans of America's most unpopular war viewed the way the conflict in Iraq has unfolded.
We're still over there, and now it just, because of that, it just sure gives you kind of the same feeling that we had in Vietnam, that there's it might be tough to accomplish what we wanted, or that we were over there in the first place. So
people in places like Emporia say no matter whether they support the war or oppose it, nothing will diminish their devotion to the men and women who serve in uniform. Ron Whitney is not so sure that'll always be the case.
What about here in rural America? Do you think that eventually people that live here will grow so tired of the conflict that they won't even support the troops?
I'm afraid so.
From the hole, forward, march!
But that long tradition, which reserves a special place for those who fight their nation's wars, regardless of the popularity of any particular war, continues. At least for now.
Glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on.
That's it for now, but join me next time for another edition of Witness.